Have you ever looked at an ancient ruin and wondered, how did they build this? Stones so massive they defy modern cranes, walls so precise that not even a blade of grass can slip between them. What secrets are these ancient structures still hiding? Welcome to Unearthed Secrets, where we uncover the world's most baffling ancient wonders that science still can't fully explain. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe, tap the like button, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I'd love to know. The lion that guards a forgotten sky fortress, high above the endless green canopy of Sri Lanka, where the jungle rolls like waves beneath the slow breath of the sky. A great stone stands alone. It rises abruptly, as though the earth itself pushed it upwards in a single moment of defiance, creating a fortress of rock that reaches toward the clouds. The locals call it Sigiriya. To see it from afar is to feel the tug of something ancient, something unshaken by centuries. Even before you know its story, you sense that it is not just a rock, it is a memory, a monument, and a mystery all at once. As the dawn mist drifts across the jungle, the monolith awakens in golden light. Its face glows with warm tones of red and ochre, its surface carved and weathered by time. Vines crawl up its base, but nothing dares climb too far. The air here is different, sharper, thinner, touched by the whispers of history, and at its entrance, waiting as it has for over 1,000 years, lies the lion. Not a living creature, but a guardian carved into stone, its paws alone standing several meters tall, massive and imposing, frozen mid-stride, as if it might leap at any moment. To walk toward those paws is to feel yourself shrinking. Each claw is as tall as a person. The muscles of the stone lion are captured with impossible precision, its form carved by hands that believed in power, beauty, and permanence. Today, only the paws remain, but once, there was more. There was a towering lion's body and head, its jaws open as though swallowing the sky. The entrance to the fortress lay through its mouth, an arch of strength and warning. Every visitor who climbed the winding staircase would pass beneath its teeth, stepping into the kingdom of a man who wanted to rule from the clouds. The rock fortress of Sigiriya was built in the 5th century by a king named Kashyapa. His story is one of ambition, betrayal, and fear, and it clings to this place like mist. Kashyapa was not the chosen heir to the throne. His father, King Datusena, favored another son, Moggallana, born of the queen. But Kashyapa's hunger for power ran deeper than tradition. He staged a coup, seizing the crown, and in the chaos, his father met a grim fate. Some say Kashyapa walled him alive inside a dam he had built, sealing not only his father's body, but also his own future within the stone. With blood on his hands and a stolen crown on his head, Kashyapa feared what would come next. His brother Moggallana escaped to India, vowing to return with an army. Kashyapa needed a fortress, not just to defend himself, but to prove that he was untouchable. And so he turned to the lone monolith of Sigiriya, a rock so steep and isolated that no enemy could hope to scale it. What he built there would not just be a citadel, it would be a statement, a palace that reached into the heavens, a symbol of his power carved into the bones of the earth itself. Imagine what it must have been like during the construction of Sigiriya. The jungle, alive with heat and sound, filled with the rhythmic clang of tools striking stone. Men carried bricks and carved steps into the rock face, their bodies glistening under the sun. There were no cranes, no modern machines, only sheer determination and human ingenuity. Each stone was hauled by hand, each terrace shaped through endless labor. Even now, centuries later, archaeologists marvel at how they built it all. The stairways, the pools, the walls, and the gardens, all perched high above the jungle canopy. At the heart of this fortress palace stood the lion. Its form was grand, sculpted as though it were an eternal guardian, its face watching over the kingdom below. Even now, with most of its body gone, the paws alone tell of its magnificence. There is a weight to them, not just in size but in presence, as though they remember everything that once passed beneath their shadow. When the sun dips low and the light turns soft, those paws glow with a quiet warmth, and if you let your mind wander, you can almost imagine the entire lion taking shape again, roaring across the centuries. The path to the summit begins with these paws. You climb between them, walking where countless others once walked, feeling the stone cool beneath your hands. The steps are steep, winding upward in tight switchbacks, hugging the cliff face. At points you can see the jungle spreading endlessly below, its trees blending into a sea of green that stretches beyond the horizon. As you ascend, you are not just climbing a rock, you are moving through layers of time, each step taking you closer to the past. Sigiriya is more than a fortress, it is also a work of art. The walls of the rock were once covered with vibrant frescoes, paintings of graceful women, their hands filled with flowers, their faces serene and distant. These are some of the oldest surviving works of art in Sri Lanka. Even today, what remains of them is hauntingly beautiful. The colors have faded, but the expressions endure. Some say they are celestial maidens. Others believe they were Kashyap's queens or attendants. Whoever they were, they seem to look past you, as though they belong to another realm. There is also the mirror wall, a polished surface that once shone so brightly that visitors could see their own reflection. Over the centuries, travelers etched poems and messages into it, turning it into a kind of time capsule of human thought. Some of these inscriptions, written in ancient scripts, speak of love, admiration and awe, feelings that have not changed in all the years since Sigiriya was built. The summit of the rock where Kashyap's palace once stood is a place of both grandeur and solitude. The ruins lie open to the sky now, but their layout tells of a place that was once alive with music, voices and ceremony. There were water gardens with pools and fountains that caught the sunlight, cooling the air. Brick walls rose in intricate patterns, and ceremonial halls looked out across the jungle. From this height, the king would have seen everything. The rivers, the villages, the far-off mountains. To him it must have felt like ruling the world. But no fortress can protect a man from his own fate. In the end, Moggallana did return, leading an army to reclaim the throne. Kashyapa, proud and unwilling to hide, rode out to meet him on the battlefield. It is said that at a crucial moment, Kashyap's elephant panicked and turned, and his army mistook this for retreat. Abandoned and surrounded, the king chose death over capture. He raised his blade and ended his own life. And with that, the story of Sigiriya as a royal palace came to a close. After Kashyap's death, Sigiriya was abandoned as a fortress. It became a monastery for Buddhist monks, a place of meditation and quiet reflection. The monks lived among the ruins, walking the same paths that once echoed with royal footsteps. They left behind simple carvings and shrines, adding their own layer of history to this already sacred place. But even they, eventually, moved on. The jungle reclaimed the rock, wrapping it in silence for centuries. When explorers rediscovered Sigiriya, they found more than just a ruin. They found a puzzle. How had this place been built? So high and so precisely. The water gardens, for instance, are a marvel of ancient engineering. Some of their fountains still function, fed by underground channels that bring water from reservoirs at the base of the rock. These channels are so cleverly designed that they work even after all these centuries. Standing there, you realize that Kashyap's builders were not just laborers, they were visionaries. Even today, there is something almost otherworldly about Sigiriya. As the sun sets and shadows crawl across the rock face, the lion's paws seem to shift slightly in the fading light, as if they are alive, watching. The jungle grows quiet, except for the hum of insects and the distant cry of a bird. The air cools, carrying with it the scent of earth and leaves. It is in these moments, when the world slows down, that you feel the weight of the past pressing gently against your shoulders. What must it have been like, standing here 1,000 years ago, under a sky full of stars? The palace would have been lit by torches, their flames flickering against the stone walls. The lion's silhouette would have loomed large in the moonlight, a silent guardian. Perhaps Kashyapa would have stood on the edge of the summit, looking out over the night, wondering if his power would last forever. He built Sigiriya to defy time, but time is the one enemy no king can defeat. Today, Sigiriya belongs to everyone who comes here. It belongs to the traveler climbing its steps, to the artist sketching its ruins, to the historian trying to piece together its story. But it also belongs to itself. It is a place that breathes its own life, that holds its own silence. The lion still guards the entrance, its paws planted firmly on the earth, as if daring the centuries to erase it. And perhaps that is the true magic of Sigiriya, that even in ruin, it feels complete. It does not need to be whole to tell its story. When you leave, when you walk down the steps and pass once more between the lion's paws, you cannot help but glance back. The rock stands there, as it always has, rising above the jungle like a dream. The wind brushes past you, carrying with it a whisper, or maybe just the sound of leaves. But for a moment, you might believe it is the lion speaking, reminding you that some places are built not just to be seen but to be remembered. The incomplete walls of Ollantaytambo, high in the sacred valley of Peru, where the mountains rise like ancient guardians and the air feels as thin and sharp as crystal. there stands a place both haunting and majestic. It is a fortress, or perhaps a temple, or perhaps something that is still misunderstood even today. Its walls, though incomplete, tell a story that has never been fully written down. This place is called Ollantaytambo. To stand here is to step into a space between worlds, one where history and legend blur, where stone whispers, and where the ghosts of builders who never finished their work still seem to linger. The first sight of Ollantaytambo can make you pause. The terraces carved into the mountain slope stretch outward like giant staircases, each level perfectly measured and aligned. They are vast, almost overwhelming in scale, their edges so sharp and clean that they seem unnatural, as though someone had taken a ruler to the mountain itself. Above the terraces rise massive stone walls, some of them unfinished, their stones resting half-carved or left lying on the ground, as though abandoned mid-thought. And that is where the mystery begins. Why does this place feel both complete and incomplete at the same time? Why are there stones that seem to wait for hands that will never return? The Inca built Ollantaytambo in the 15th century, during the height of their empire. But to say built is too simple a word for what they did here. The Inca were not just builders, they were sculptors of the earth. They could shape mountainsides into intricate terraces that not only looked beautiful, but functioned as highly advanced agricultural systems. Here at Ollantaytambo, the terraces were designed to catch the sun at just the right angle, to trap heat during the day and release it at night, allowing crops to grow even in the cold Andean air. Every line, every curve, every angle served a purpose. And yet, for all their skill, something interrupted their work. To understand why, you need to feel the stones up close. The walls of Ollantaytambo are made from massive blocks of andesite and red granite, some weighing over 50 tons. These stones were not quarried nearby. The nearest known quarries are miles away, across the valley on the opposite side of the Urubamba River. Imagine that for a moment. The Inca had no wheels, no beasts of burden like horses or oxen, and yet they managed to haul these colossal stones down the slopes, across the river, and up the mountainside. Some archaeologists believe they used wooden sledges and ropes, dragging the stones with sheer human strength, while others think they used logs as rollers. But even with these methods, the task is staggering. One misstep on those steep cliffs would have meant disaster. There is a place nearby called the Stone Trail, a path etched into the earth where these blocks were believed to have been dragged. Along this trail lie stones that were never moved to the fortress, the so-called tired stones, as if the mountain itself grew weary of the effort. They remain there to this day, silent witnesses to an unfinished dream. When you stand in front of the incomplete walls of Ollantaytambo, you can see where the stones were being fitted. Some are polished on one side, their surfaces smooth and shining in the sunlight, while the rest of the block remains rough and raw, as though waiting for the final touch of a master craftsman. The precision of the finished stones is nothing short of miraculous. They fit together with such accuracy that not even a blade of grass can slip between them. No mortar was used, yet they have stood for centuries, enduring earthquakes that would have destroyed lesser structures. It's the unfinished stones, though, that capture the imagination. Why did the Inca stop? The common theory is that Ollantaytambo's construction was interrupted by the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors in the early 16th century. When the invaders came, the Inca shifted their focus from building to defending, and Ollantaytambo became a fortress rather than a ceremonial center. Some believe that the walls were meant to be part of a great temple dedicated to the sun, but that temple was never completed. Others suggest that the stones themselves, lying abandoned along the trail, were left as part of a desperate, hurried defense, the Inca fleeing before they could finish their masterpiece. There is another, quieter theory. Some archaeologists believe that parts of Ollantaytambo may actually predate the Inca. They argue that the style of the stonework, particularly the megalithic blocks, is different from typical Inca architecture. Could it be that the Inca inherited this site from an earlier, now lost civilization? Perhaps the Inca were merely continuing work that had begun long before their time. If that is true, then Ollantaytambo is not just unfinished, it is a bridge between unknown pasts and recorded history. A story that began with a people whose names we may never know. Standing among these walls, you can feel the weight of such mysteries. The stones are cool beneath your hands, their surfaces etched with faint marks, not random scratches, but deliberate grooves, as though the builders used some unknown technique to shape them. The sun moves slowly across the sky, casting shadows that bring out the textures and lines. The terraces below shimmer in shades of green and gold, their fields still cultivated by local farmers, just as they were hundreds of years ago. Life continues here, quietly, while the stones remain frozen in time. One of the most remarkable features of Ollantaytambo is the Temple of the Sun, a structure that was never fully completed. It is here that you find the largest and most mysterious stones. Some of these blocks are so perfectly cut that they resemble puzzle pieces, each one designed to interlock with its neighbor. The corners are sharp, the edges straight, and yet they curve in ways that seem to defy conventional tools. Archaeologists have tried to replicate the precision of this stonework using only the tools known to the Inca, hammer stones, chisels of bronze, but the results have never come close to matching the originals. It is as though the builders had a knowledge of stone far beyond what we understand today. And then there is the legend. According to Andean mythology, Ollantaytambo was named after a warrior named Ollantay, who fell in love with the daughter of the Inca emperor. The emperor disapproved, and Ollantay rebelled, using the fortress as his stronghold. For years he held out against the imperial army, but in the end he was betrayed and captured. Whether this story is true or not, it adds a layer of tragedy to the already mysterious air of this place. The incomplete walls begin to feel less like a failure, and more like the remnants of a story that ended too soon. As the day drifts toward evening, Ollantaytambo transforms, the sunlight softens, painting the stones in shades of amber and rose. The wind moves gently through the terraces, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and wildflowers. It's easy to imagine the Inca walking here, their footsteps quiet against the stone steps, their voices rising in chants during ceremonies that once filled this valley with sound. Now, all that remains is silence, broken only by the distant call of a bird or the murmur of water from the nearby river. When night falls, the fortress takes on a different kind of life. The stones, so solid and unyielding in the day, seem almost fluid under the moonlight. Shadows creep along their surfaces, revealing patterns you might not have noticed before. The stars above the sacred valley are brighter than almost anywhere else in the world, and when you stand among the unfinished walls, it feels as though you are standing at the edge of time. You wonder about the people who began this work, what they dreamed of, what they feared, and why their story ended so abruptly. Perhaps the greatest beauty of Ollantaytambo lies not in what was completed, but in what was left undone. The unfinished walls speak of ambition and vision, of a people who saw the mountain not as a barrier, but as a canvas. They remind us that history is not always about perfection or completion. Sometimes it is about the traces left behind, the whispers of what might have been. The giants' tombs of Sardinia. There are places on Earth where time feels like it has forgotten to move, where the air itself carries stories that no one alive remembers. Sardinia, the rugged island floating in the Mediterranean Sea, is one of those places. It is a land of jagged mountains, whispering winds and wildflowers that grow in the cracks of ancient stones. And among these stones are monuments so large and so strange that they don't seem to belong to our world at all. They are called the giants' tombs, or tombi dei giganti in Italian. Standing before one of these colossal structures, it's hard not to feel small, as though you've stepped into a forgotten chapter of human history that is still being written by the winds that sweep across the island. To wander Sardinia is to step into a place where past and present merge. The sea glistens like polished glass in the distance, but your feet walk on paths carved thousands of years ago. The people who built the giants' tombs left no written records, no scrolls or carvings to explain themselves. Instead, they left these massive stone chambers, monuments to their dead, and perhaps to their gods, standing in silence among hills and valleys. Over 300 of these tombs remain scattered across the island, each one slightly different, yet all sharing a common mystery: who built them, and why. When you stand near one, the first thing you notice is the scale. Some are over 30 meters long, with upright slabs of stone forming entrances taller than an average man. They feel too big for ordinary human hands. No wonder the locals, centuries ago, believed they were built for giants. The legends of Sardinia tell of a race of beings, massive, powerful, and ancient, who once lived on the island. These giants, the stories say, built enormous structures and ruled the land before disappearing. And when early farmers stumbled across the tombs, overgrown and half-buried, they saw the giant stones and concluded that no ordinary human could have built them. Even today, there are elders in remote villages who speak of these giants with a quiet certainty, as if the stones themselves are proof that something larger than life once walked here. But who were the real builders? Archaeologists believe the tombs were created by the Nuragic people, a mysterious civilization that thrived on Sardinia between 1800 BCE and 1200 BCE. The Nuragic culture is known for its stone towers called Nuraji that dot the landscape like watchful sentinels, as well as its sacred wells and intricate bronze figurines. Yet despite their achievements, the Nuragic left no written language. Their story is told only through what they built, and the giants' tombs are among their greatest enigmas. Standing before one, you can't help but be drawn to the details. The tomb begins with a curved facade of upright stones, fanning outward like the open wings of a bird. At the center of this facade is a towering vertical slab, called a stele. Some steles are carved with shapes resembling doorways, symbols perhaps of passage into another world. Beyond this facade lies a long, narrow burial chamber, roofed with massive stone slabs and once covered with earth to form a low mound. Inside, the chamber is dark and cool, the air holding a stillness that feels older than time itself. This was not just a grave, it was a house for the dead, a place for the living, to connect with the ancestors. The Nuragic people believed in community even in death. These tombs were collective burial sites, where generations of families were laid to rest together. Archaeologists have found the remains of dozens of individuals in a single tomb, men, women and children, accompanied by pottery, tools and ornaments. Perhaps these offerings were meant to serve the dead in the afterlife, or perhaps they were symbols of remembrance. We cannot know for sure. But we can imagine families gathering at the tomb, lighting fires in the courtyard formed by the facade, singing songs that have long since been lost to silence. To truly understand the power of these monuments, imagine walking across a Sardinian hillside on a warm afternoon. The grass crunches softly underfoot, and the air is filled with the scent of rosemary and wild thyme. Ahead, half hidden by bushes, a shape begins to emerge. As you approach, you realize it is not just a pile of stones, but something deliberate, something monumental. The facade rises from the earth, like the prow of an ancient ship, the central stele towering above you. The stones are rough to the touch, but they have been shaped with care, their edges smoothed by the hands of people long gone. You pause there, in front of the entrance, and feel a presence, a weight of history that presses against your skin. Codu Vecchiu is one of the most famous giants' tombs, located in the northern part of Sardinia. Visiting it is like stepping into another era. The tomb sits on a gentle slope, surrounded by fields and olive groves. Its facade is wide and symmetrical, with the central stele standing nearly 4 meters tall. Carved into its base is a small opening, almost like a doorway for spirits to pass through. As you run your fingers across the cool surface of the stone, you can almost imagine the craftsmen who shaped it, their tools striking rhythmically, their faces set with determination as they worked to honor their dead. Behind the facade, the burial chamber stretches like a stone tunnel, its ceiling made from massive slabs that seem impossibly heavy for the tools of the Bronze Age. And yet, here they are, perfectly balanced, still standing after more than 3,000 years. Inside the chamber, the air is quiet and damp, it smells faintly of earth and stone. When you speak, your voice echoes softly, as though the walls are listening. What was it like to build such a monument? Picture the Nuragic people, working together under the hot Sardinian sun. They would have cut the stones from nearby quarries using harder rocks as chisels, slowly shaping each slab. To transport these stones, some weighing several tons, they may have used wooden sledges or dragged them on rollers. Ropes made from plant fibers, teams of strong men, and sheer determination would have been their tools. Every step of the process would have been deliberate, almost ceremonial. For these tombs were not merely functional, they were spiritual. Each stone was a connection between the living and the dead, between earth and sky. Some researchers believe that the giants' tombs were aligned with the stars. Certain tombs face the rising or setting sun, while others seem to point toward particular constellations. This suggests that the Nuragic people saw life and death as part of a larger cosmic cycle. At night, when the stars burned bright in the sky, these tombs may have served as portals, linking the ancestors to the heavens above. Imagine a family standing before the tomb at sunset, their faces lit by firelight, their voices lifted in prayer as the first stars began to shine. In that moment, the tomb was not just a grave, it was a bridge to eternity. Lilogi, another famous giant's tomb, stands not far from Codu Vecchiu. Its stele is even taller, towering over the landscape, like a sentinel. Standing there with the wind whispering through the grass, you can almost hear echoes of the past, footsteps on the earth, the distant sound of stone striking stone. Further south lies Isina Ithomes, one of the most beautiful and best preserved tombs on the island. It is set in a quiet valley, surrounded by rolling hills. Visit at sunrise, and you will see the first light of day spilling across the facade, casting long shadows that seem to stretch toward the heavens. To spend a day among the tombs is to take a journey through time. In the morning, they greet the sun like silent guardians. By afternoon, they bask in the warmth of the day, their stones glowing softly. At night, under the vast Sardinian sky, they become something else entirely. The stars are so bright here, far from any city lights, that the tombs seem to dissolve into the darkness, their outlines blending with the constellations above. You can imagine the Nuragic people lying on the ground, staring at the same stars, whispering the same questions we ask today. Where do we come from? Where do we go when we die? Do our spirits join the stars, just as the ancestors once did? The legends of giants are still alive in Sardinia. In some places, locals will tell you about bones unearthed in the hills, bones so large they could not have belonged to any ordinary human. While most of these claims are simply misidentified fossils, the stories persist, as stories always do. They speak to a truth deeper than fact, the sense that these tombs are bigger than life, that they belong to a world just out of reach. What makes the giants' tombs so moving is their silence. They don't boast like the pyramids of Egypt or the temples of Greece. They simply exist, blending into the land as though they have always been there. And yet, they endure. Thousands of years have passed, empires have risen and fallen, cities have been built and abandoned, but the tombs remain, standing watch over the island. They are a testament to human resilience, to the desire to remember, to honor, to build something that lasts. Perhaps that is why they feel so alive. When you sit near one, as the sun dips low and the wind rustles the grass, you can almost feel the presence of the people who built it. You imagine them laughing, singing, grieving, celebrating. You imagine them carrying stones with calloused hands, their bodies strong but weary, their hearts filled with love for those they were building for. Because that is what these tombs are, in the end, expressions of love. They are monuments to family, to community, to the belief that life is bigger than any one of us. Even today, when archaeologists excavate these sites, they find traces of offerings, small pieces of pottery, fragments of tools, remnants of feasts held long ago. These objects are humble, but they speak volumes. They tell us that the people who built the giants' tombs were not just builders, they were storytellers, dreamers, people who looked at the stars and saw meaning. And so, when you stand before a giant's tomb, you are not just looking at an ancient structure, you are looking at a story carved into stone. A story of life and death, of belief and memory. A story that has survived for over 3,000 years, waiting for someone like you to come and listen. The stones are patient, they do not rush to reveal their secrets, but if you stand there long enough, if you let the silence wash over you, you may begin to hear what they have to say. Whispers of Stone at Sacsayhuaman. High in the Peruvian Andes, where the air grows thin and every breath carries a taste of earth and wind, there is a place that feels older than memory itself. Sacsayhuaman is not merely a ruin, it is a voice, silent yet speaking, steady yet alive. The stones here are unlike anything else in the world. Arranged in a way that defies time and logic, they are immense blocks, some taller than a person, others as wide as a room, each one resting against its neighbor with such precision that even the thinnest blade of grass could not slip between them. To stand before these walls is to feel as though you are being watched, as if the stones themselves hold the gaze of centuries. The name Sacsayhuaman, often translated as place where the falcon is satisfied, carries a sense of guardianship. The fortress sits like a watchful bird perched above Cusco, the once great capital of the Inca Empire. The city below was said to be laid out in the shape of a puma, a creature both fierce and sacred to the Inca, and Sacsayhuaman formed its head, its teeth, and its strength. Here the rulers and priests could look down over their domain, see the mountains stretching beyond the horizon, and know that they were at the very center of their world. The first thing you notice, standing on the open plateau, is the silence. It is not an empty silence, but a rich, layered quiet that feels alive. The wind slides over the hills, carrying with it the faint scent of wild grass and distant fires. Occasionally, the call of a bird echoes against the stones, sharp and fleeting. But the stones themselves are still, radiating a calm, enduring energy. Touch one of them, and you might feel the faintest vibration, not from sound or movement, but from the weight of history pressing softly against your palm. The walls of Sacsayhuaman are arranged in 3 great zigzagging tiers, each one like the jaw of a massive animal. It is easy to see why some have compared it to the teeth of a puma. The stones fit together so perfectly, that they almost seem molded, yet they bear no marks of the kind of tools we know today. Each block is unique, carved to fit its neighbors like an irregular puzzle. This technique, called polygonal masonry, is not just a marvel of construction, but a testament to the patience and ingenuity of the Inca. The walls were built to withstand earthquakes, an ever-present threat in this part of the world, and centuries of tremors have proven their resilience. When modern buildings have crumbled, these stones have held fast, locked together as though bonded by more than just gravity. It is said that some of these stones weigh over 100 tons, and yet they were transported from quarries miles away. How did they do it? This question lingers like a whisper in the wind. Without wheels, without iron, without the machines we take for granted, the Inca managed feats of engineering that challenge even modern minds. Some believe they used ramps and wooden rollers, hauling the stones with sheer human strength and coordination. Others suggest that they harnessed techniques we have forgotten, perhaps using the natural landscape as a guide, or even employing some lost knowledge of sound and vibration to move and shape the stone. And then there are those who wonder if there was more. If the Inca inherited these stones from a civilization even older, one that has vanished into the folds of time. The Inca themselves left no written records to explain their methods. Their history was told through stories, through songs, through the patterns woven into textiles and the lines etched into the land. To them, the world was alive with meaning. Every mountain, every river, every stone had a spirit, an essence called huaca. Sacsayhuaman was not just a fortress, it was a sacred place, aligned with the movements of the sun, the stars and the seasons. During the great festival of Inti Raymi, held at the winter solstice, thousands of people would gather here. They would bring offerings of maize, coca leaves, and chicha, the sacred corn beer, and they would dance and sing in honor of Inti the sun god. The Sapa Inca, the emperor, would appear dressed in gold, his garments flashing like fire as he performed rituals to ensure the return of the sun's warmth and the fertility of the land. Imagine what it must have been like on such a day. The walls, gleaming in the bright Andean light, would have seemed to hum with energy as the crowd filled the terraces. The sound of drums would have echoed off the stones, deep and resonant, blending with the chant of priests and the cries of conch shell horns. From the high platforms, one could see the entire valley below, the city of Cusco alive with activity, and above it all, the mountains stood like eternal sentinels, their snow-capped peaks glinting in the distance. It was not just a celebration, it was a reminder that the people were connected to the land, to the sky, and to the stones that sheltered them. When the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, they saw the strength of Sacsayhuaman and recognized it as both a threat and a prize. The fortress became the site of fierce battles during the siege of Cusco in 1536. Manco Inca, one of the last great leaders of the Inca, defended these walls with his warriors. They rained stones and arrows down on the invaders, using the high ground to their advantage. For a time, it seemed the Inca might reclaim their city, but the Spanish, with their steel weapons and horses, eventually overwhelmed them. The battle ended, but the fortress remained, scarred yet unbroken. After the conquest, the Spanish dismantled much of Sacsayhuaman, carrying its stones down into the valley to build churches and colonial houses. The Cathedral of Cusco, which still stands today, was built from stones once placed on this sacred plateau. Yet even with so much taken, the essence of Sacsayhuaman endures. The largest stones were too heavy to move, and they remain where they were set centuries ago, defying the passage of time. Walking among these stones today, you feel that history pressing in on you from every side. There is a weight to the air, not heavy, but full of voices, full of stories that have yet to be told. If you close your eyes and listen, you can almost hear them, the sound of distant drums, the call of a conch shell, the murmur of a language long gone but not forgotten. The stones remember, they always remember. There are legends of hidden tunnels beneath Sacsayhuaman, passages that connect it to other sacred sites in Cusco, like the Coricancha, the Temple of the Sun. Some say these tunnels are filled with gold and treasures hidden during the conquest, sealed away so that they would never fall into foreign hands. Others believe they hold secrets far older, artifacts from a forgotten age when the world was different, when people understood things we can only guess at now. Explorers have searched for these tunnels for centuries, but they remain elusive, like shadows just beyond reach. And then there are the myths about how the stones were placed. Some say that the Inca priests called upon the mountain spirits, chanting and singing until the stones themselves grew lighter, as though they wanted to move. To modern ears, this might sound impossible, but to the Inca, the line between the spiritual and the physical was not so rigid. The earth was alive, and by honoring it, they believed they could achieve miracles. Spend an entire day at Sacsayhuaman, and you will see its many faces. In the early morning, when the sun rises over the hills, the stones are cold and grey, their surfaces slick with dew, birds circle overhead, their cries sharp in the crisp air. By midday the sun beats down, turning the stones pale and bright, their edges glowing as if lit from within. Shadows shrink and vanish, leaving the walls bare and exposed. In the late afternoon, as the light softens, the stones take on a golden warmth. The air cools, and the scent of earth deepens. And as night falls, the stars appear, thousands of them, scattered across the sky like grains of salt. Under this vast, silent canopy, Sacsayhuaman feels like a bridge between worlds, a place where the earth and the heavens touch. Archaeologists have studied this site for centuries, yet much remains unknown. Was it built solely as a fortress, or was it primarily a ceremonial center? Did the Inca build it all, or did they inherit some parts from a culture even older? These questions linger, unanswered, like the soft murmur of wind through the stones, but perhaps that is the point. Perhaps Sacsayhuaman was never meant to be fully understood. Perhaps it is a reminder that not all mysteries are meant to be solved. What we do know is that this place mattered. It mattered enough for thousands of people to labor for years, carving and hauling stones, shaping them until they fit together with an elegance that even modern builders admire. It mattered enough for the Inca to hold their most important ceremonies here, to defend it with their lives. And it matters still, because when you stand here you feel connected to the past, to the earth, to something larger than yourself. In the quiet moments, when the day is ending and the shadows grow long, Sacsayhuaman whispers. It tells of empires and battles, of festivals and prayers, of hands that once shaped stone with care and purpose. It tells of resilience, of the way mountains endure and people adapt. It tells of a time when the world felt full of meaning, when every stone had a story, and every story was part of the land. As you walk away, you glance back one last time. The walls are there, solid and still, yet somehow alive. You feel as though they are watching you, sending you off with a message you cannot quite understand, but will carry with you all the same. Perhaps that is the true magic of Sacsayhuaman. It does not give answers, it gives presence, and in its presence you remember what it feels like to stand in the shadow of something greater than time. The obelisk that was too big to rise, in the heat of the southern Egyptian sun, far from the crowded bustle of Cairo and the towering pyramids of Giza, lies a place that feels oddly quiet, almost forgotten, yet holding a story so grand, it still challenges our imagination. This place is not a temple or a tomb. It is not even a structure that was completed. It is a single colossal stone, lying where it was born, still partially attached to the earth that shaped it. This is the unfinished obelisk of Aswan, a monument that was meant to rise higher than any other obelisk in the history of Egypt, but one that never fulfilled its destiny. Instead, it remains here, half-formed, whispering of ancient ambitions and the quiet persistence of stone. To truly understand the story of this obelisk, you have to picture Aswan itself. It is a city where the Nile slows, winding through golden sands and rocky hills. The sun is relentless here, painting the landscape in shades of amber and ochre. The granite quarries that surround Aswan were once the lifeblood of Egypt's greatest builders. It was from here that the ancient Egyptians extracted the hard red granite that would become columns, statues, and obelisks, stone that would outlast even the names of the pharaohs who ordered them. Standing in these quarries today, the silence is almost overwhelming. Only the faint sound of wind moving across the desert floor, or perhaps the call of a distant bird, interrupts the stillness. Yet, if you close your eyes, you can almost imagine the sounds that once filled this place. The rhythmic pounding of dolerite pounding stones against granite, the scraping of copper tools, the voices of workers shouting commands, the sound of ambition echoing in the heat. The unfinished obelisk lies in a shallow pit, still connected to the bedrock on one side. It is enormous. At more than 42 meters long, about 137 feet, and weighing an estimated 1,200 tons, it would have been the single largest obelisk ever raised in Egypt, dwarfing even the famous standing obelisks we see in Luxor or Karnak. You can see the marks where the workers were shaping it, the curved scars left by thousands of strikes from pounding stones. It was here that something went wrong. Somewhere deep in the heart of the granite, a crack appeared, spreading across its surface. For the ancient builders, this was a disaster. A single crack in such a massive piece of stone would have rendered it useless as an obelisk. No matter how much work they had put into it, no matter how many weeks or months of labor it had taken, This one fracture meant the monument could never be completed, and so they abandoned it, leaving it to rest where it had been carved. Yet this unfinished obelisk tells us so much about the skill and ambition of the Egyptians. When we look at it today, we do not just see a failed project, we see evidence of a building culture so advanced that it still leaves us questioning how they achieved such feats without modern machinery. How did they plan to raise a 200-ton piece of granite and transport it across the Nile? How did they move similar obelisks, like the 300-ton one that now stands in St. Peter's Square in Rome? These are questions that have puzzled historians and engineers alike. The Egyptians themselves never wrote down the exact details of their methods, perhaps because to them it was simply part of their craft, something every skilled builder would know. To us, it feels almost like magic. Imagine the scene as it might have been nearly 3,500 years ago during the reign of Hatshepsut, the powerful female pharaoh who is believed to have commissioned this obelisk. Hatshepsut was a ruler who understood the power of symbols, and few symbols were as potent as the obelisk. To the Egyptians, an obelisk was more than just a stone monument. It was a ray of sunlight frozen in time, a connection between the earth and the heavens, a way of reaching toward the gods. Hatshepsut already had 2 massive obelisks erected at the Temple of Karnak, one of which still stands today, the tallest surviving ancient obelisk in Egypt. But perhaps she wanted something even greater, something that would surpass every other monument of her time. The Aswan obelisk was to be that masterpiece. In the quarry, hundreds of workers would have been laboring under the sun. They had no iron tools. Iron was not yet in widespread use, so they relied on copper chisels, and more importantly, on pounding stones made of dolerite, a rock even harder than granite. These stones, roughly the size of a human head, were used to hammer away at the granite surface, bit by bit, shaping and smoothing it. It was grueling, exhausting work. The workers would have broken for water, for shade, perhaps for a brief moment of rest, before returning to their task. They would have lived nearby in makeshift camps, cooking simple meals, sleeping on mats beneath the stars, and every day, the shape of the obelisk would have grown more distinct, its edges sharper, its surface smoother. The process of freeing such a massive stone from the bedrock was an art in itself. The Egyptians would have carved narrow trenches around the sides, gradually deepening them until the obelisk stood on a thin spine of granite. They would then have pounded and chiseled underneath, working carefully to avoid cracking the stone, but this time the crack came anyway, perhaps a flaw in the rock that they could not see until it was too late, or perhaps a mistake in the angle of the blows. Whatever the cause, the obelisk was abandoned, left half buried in its quarry bed, never to stand. Standing beside it now, you can trace the story with your fingers. The surface of the stone is smooth in places, polished by the hands of workers long gone, and rough in others where the pounding stones left their marks. The unfinished sides show the stages of the work, the trench, the rough shaping, the careful smoothing. It is like a frozen moment in time, as if the workers have just put down their tools for the day and will return tomorrow to finish their task. But of course, they never did. There is something almost human about this monument. Unlike the perfect completed obelisks that stand tall and proud, this one feels vulnerable. It reminds us that even the greatest civilizations faced setbacks, that even the most skilled builders encountered failures, and yet in that failure, there is a kind of beauty. The obelisk still lies here, massive and silent, outlasting the empire that created it, outlasting the centuries of sand and wind and sun. It has become a monument not just to ambition, but to endurance. As the day moves on, the light changes across the granite. In the morning, the stone is cool and pale, with shadows filling the trenches and cracks. By midday, the sun blazes down, and the granite glows a deep, warm red. You can almost see the flecks of quartz and mica sparkling like tiny stars embedded in the surface. In the evening, as the sun sets over the desert, the obelisk turns a dusky gold, and the surrounding hills cast long shadows over it. There is a quiet majesty to this moment, a reminder that while the obelisk never rose, it is still part of the rhythm of the land and sky. Nearby, the modern city of Aswan carries on with its life, boats moving along the Nile, markets buzzing with traders, children laughing in the narrow streets. But in the quarry, time feels slower. There are few sounds here, just the whisper of wind and the occasional cry of a bird. It is easy to forget the modern world and imagine the ancient one instead. You can almost hear the voices of the workers, the steady ringing of stone against stone, the low hum of conversation as they planned their next steps. You can imagine the overseer standing on a ridge, watching, measuring, calculating. You can even picture Hatshepsut herself, visiting the quarry to inspect the progress of her monument, her royal entourage trailing behind her in the heat. For all its silence, this unfinished obelisk speaks to us in a way that few monuments can. It is not a polished, completed masterpiece. It is a glimpse into the process, into the labor and determination behind the grandeur of ancient Egypt. It reminds us that these wonders were not built by magic or by gods, but by human hands, skilled, determined and tireless hands that shaped the world around them. Even now, modern engineers study this obelisk to understand how it was made. The tool marks provide clues to the techniques the Egyptians used, and the size of the trench gives insight into the logistics of freeing such a massive stone, yet the question of how they would have raised it remains. We know they transported smaller obelisks by dragging them on sledges across sand, using water to reduce friction. We know they erected them by building earthen ramps and carefully tilting the stone into place. But could such methods have worked for a stone this massive, or did they have techniques we have yet to rediscover? The unfinished obelisk is a mystery, but it is also a teacher. It tells us that perfection is not always necessary for something to have meaning. Sometimes it is the incomplete things that carry the deepest stories, the ones that show the raw effort, the dreams and the challenges of those who came before us. It is easy to look at the pyramids or the temples and be awed by their perfection. But here, lying in the earth, the obelisk reminds us of the journey, of the work that goes unseen, of the moments when things did not go as planned. When night falls over Aswan, the quarry becomes a place of shadows and starlight. The heat of the day fades, replaced by a cool desert breeze. The stars appear, thousands of them, scattered across the black sky. The obelisk, bathed in moonlight, looks almost alive, as if it is dreaming of the day it was meant to stand, of the sky it never reached. And you stand there too, listening to the silence, feeling the weight of time pressing gently around you. You realize that this stone, though it never rose, has achieved something remarkable. It has endured unchanged for thousands of years. It will be here long after we are gone, lying quietly in the place where it was born. The singing statues of the Nile. In the land of the eternal river, where the Nile's waters glisten like molten gold under the morning sun, two ancient giants have stood for thousands of years, their faces weathered and softened by time, their gaze fixed toward the horizon. They have watched empires rise and fall, seen the shifting of sands, and felt the gentle breath of desert winds. These are the colossi of Memnon, the singing statues of the Nile, guardians of a forgotten past and keepers of secrets that echo across millennia. To stand before them is to feel small, not just in body, but in time. These statues have been here for more than 3,400 years, built during the reign of Amenhotep III, a pharaoh whose rule marked one of the most prosperous eras of ancient Egypt. They were carved from massive blocks of quartzite sandstone, each statue towering nearly 20 meters, about 66 feet, above the plain. Even in their damaged state, their presence is overwhelming. You feel as though they are not merely statues but living memories, vessels of a story that the desert still whispers under its breath. Long ago, these colossal figures flanked the entrance to Amenhotep III's mortuary temple, a magnificent complex that once stood on the western bank of the Nile near modern-day Luxor. Today the temple is mostly gone, lost to time, earthquakes and floods, but the colossi remain silent sentinels of a world that has vanished. Silent, that is, except for the strange voice they once had. For centuries people believed one of these statues could sing. Imagine the scene thousands of years ago. The Nile floods had receded, leaving behind fertile black soil. Farmers in the fields bent over young crops, while fishermen cast their nets into the river's shimmering currents. The temple complex of Amenhotep III would have dominated the horizon, gleaming under the desert sun. It was a place of ritual, of offerings, of grand processions honoring the gods and the pharaoh who claimed divinity in life and in death. At its gates these two massive statues stood, their eyes cast toward the rising sun. Yet by the time of the Romans, the temple lay mostly in ruins, ravaged by earthquakes that cracked and shattered the sandstone, and it was then after one of these great quakes that the northern statue began to sing. At dawn, as the first light touched its surface, a strange melodic sound would rise from the broken stone. It was a soft, eerie hum, sometimes described as the twang of a lyre string or the distant ringing of a harp. Pilgrims came from far and wide to hear this sound, believing it to be a voice from beyond the mortal world. The Greeks and Romans were captivated by it. They called the statue Memnon, linking it to a hero of their own mythology, a king of Ethiopia who fought in the Trojan War and was slain by Achilles. Memnon, they believed, was the son of the goddess Eos, the dawn, and so they imagined that the statue sang at sunrise because it was greeting his mother, the goddess of morning light. But what caused the sound? Modern science suggests that the singing was likely due to the rapid heating of the stone at sunrise. As the air warmed, moisture trapped inside the porous sandstone evaporated, causing vibrations that created a faint musical tone. It was a natural phenomenon, but to the ancients, it was divine. The Roman Emperor Hadrian even visited the Colossi with his wife Sabina in 130 CE, recording that they too heard the song. He had inscriptions carved into the stone to mark the experience, some of which you can still see today. There is something mesmerizing about the thought of these statues singing to the dawn. In a world without engines or electric hums, the sudden voice of stone would have felt like a message from the gods, as though the very earth had something to say. Travelers would rise before the sun, standing silently in the cool shadows, waiting for that moment when the first rays struck the statue. And then, as the desert warmed, a note would drift out, a sound so faint, so otherworldly, that it must have felt like a dream. But the singing did not last forever. In 199 CE, the Roman Emperor Septimius Severus ordered repairs to the damaged statue, restoring cracks and fractures. After the repairs, the statue no longer sang. It was as though the voice of Memnon had been silenced forever. Some mourned the loss, others simply took it as another sign of the shifting ages. Today, when you visit the Colossi of Memnon, you hear nothing but the breeze. The statues are cracked and weathered, their faces eroded by time. Yet they are still astonishing. Each statue is carved with intricate details. Though many have been worn away, you can still see traces of the royal features, the hands resting on knees, the remains of smaller figures that were once carved into the base, representing the pharaoh's family. They were made from sandstone quarried near modern-day Cairo, more than 400 miles away, and transported here, a feat of engineering that still impresses us. Imagine hauling blocks of stone weighing over 700 tons along the Nile, shaping them with copper chisels and dolerite pounding stones, and then raising them upright without cranes or modern machinery. The ambition behind such a project is staggering. Standing here, you can almost feel the heat of that ambition, even after all these centuries. You can picture the workers chiseling and hammering under the sun, their hands blistered, their backs aching, their hearts filled with the knowledge that they were building something for eternity. And in a way, they succeeded. The temple may be gone, but the statues remain. They have endured war, earthquakes, floods, and the slow erosion of wind and sand. They have seen the rise of the Greeks, the power of the Romans, the coming of Islam, and the modern world beyond. Through all of it, they have remained, watching in silence. At sunrise, the statues cast long shadows across the desert plain. The first light catches on the sandstone, giving it a warm, golden glow. It is not hard to imagine the song returning. Just for a moment, carried on the wind. You can close your eyes and almost hear it. That faint ringing tone, that mysterious hum that once enchanted emperors and poets. The Nile flows quietly in the distance, as it always has. The river is the thread that connects everything here. The statues, the temples, the lives of the people who once thrived along its banks. You can almost imagine Amenhotep III sailing on the Nile in his royal barge, gazing at his temple as it rose from the western shore, knowing that the statues would guard his memory long after his time. Perhaps he would have smiled to know that thousands of years later, people would still come to see these monuments, still marvel at their size and beauty, still wonder about the mysteries they hold. The Colossi are not just relics of a lost civilization, they are storytellers. Their cracks and scars tell of earthquakes and time. Their silent faces speak of kings and gods, and their lost song reminds us of how the ancients found meaning in every sound, every shadow, every whisper of stone. As the day warms, tourists gather around the statues, cameras clicking, voices murmuring in a dozen languages. Guides tell the stories of Memnon and the Dawn Song, pointing out the inscriptions left by ancient visitors. And yet, if you step away from the crowd and find a quiet spot, you can still feel the same sense of awe that travelers felt thousands of years ago. There is a calmness here, a stillness that settles over you like a soft desert breeze. The Colossi stand as they always have, watching, waiting, keeping their secrets. In the evening, as the sun sets over the Theban hills, the statues glow red in the fading light. The air cools, the tourists drift away, and silence returns. You stand there alone, gazing up at these ancient giants, and for a moment you feel connected, not just to the history of Egypt, but to something larger, to the passage of time, to the persistence of stone, to the quiet, eternal rhythm of the Nile. and as the stars begin to appear above, you can almost imagine the statues singing once more, not with sound, but with presence. A song that is not heard but felt, deep in the heart, a song of memory, of endurance, of a world long past, but never truly gone. The lost Colossus of Rhodes, in the heart of the Aegean Sea, where waves roll in like whispers, and the salt-laden wind carries the scent of eternity, once stood a marvel so immense that even the greatest travelers of the ancient world spoke of it with awe. It was the Colossus of Rhodes, a statue of the sun god Helios, the radiant protector of the island. For just over half a century, this colossal figure stood proudly at the entrance to the harbour of Rhodes, towering above the ships that sailed into its waters, a gleaming beacon of triumph and defiance. But time and earth are relentless masters. The Colossus, once the pride of its people, fell into ruin less than 60 years after it was built. It has not stood for over 2 millennia, and yet its memory remains alive, an echo of something so grand, so otherworldly, that even fragments of its story shimmer like sunlight on the waves. Imagine arriving by ship to the island of Rhodes sometime around 280 BCE. The island was one of the jewels of the ancient world, thriving under the Greek sun, its harbours busy with merchants, fishermen and travellers from distant lands. The Rhodians were known not only for their naval power, but also for their resilience. A few decades earlier, they had survived a brutal siege by Demetrius, a powerful Hellenistic king who had tried and failed to conquer their island. The people of Rhodes, grateful to the gods for their deliverance, decided to build something that would forever honour their guardian, Helios, the sun god, who they believed had guided them to victory. The result was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Colossus of Rhodes. The statue was said to stand approximately 33 meters tall, about 108 feet, making it one of the tallest statues ever built in the ancient world. Crafted of bronze plates carefully hammered and fitted over an iron framework, it would have gleamed like fire in the sunlight. Some accounts claim that the Colossus stood with one hand shielding its eyes, gazing out over the sea, while another hand held a torch or a spear. But here's where history blurs with legend. Ancient writers like Pliny the Elder suggested that ships could pass beneath the statue, as if it straddled the harbour entrance with its legs spread wide. This image of a massive godlike figure standing over the waves, welcoming or warning those who sailed into the port, is so vivid that it persists even today in paintings and films. However, most modern historians believe the statue likely stood to one side of the harbour entrance, rather than straddling it. Even so, the Colossus must have been awe-inspiring. Consider this: the Statue of Liberty, which many of us think of as massive, is roughly the same height from its feet to the crown, and yet, the Colossus was built over 2,200 years ago, without modern cranes, without steel frameworks, without the precision tools of today. To create something like that in the ancient world required not just technical mastery, but also vision, courage, and a belief that what they were building would stand for eternity. The construction of the Colossus was an incredible feat of engineering. It was designed by the sculptor Ceres of Lindos, a student of the great Lysippos, who had himself created towering bronze statues of gods and athletes. Ceres and his team worked for nearly 12 years, shaping bronze sheets and casting parts of the statue piece by piece, then hoisting them into place using ramps and scaffolding made from earth and timber. Picture the scene: teams of workers hauling massive bronze plates through the streets of Rhodes, their bodies slick with sweat under the unrelenting Mediterranean sun, blacksmiths hammering day and night to shape the metal, engineers calculating weights and angles by torchlight, knowing that a single mistake could cause the statue to collapse. The people of Rhodes must have watched the Colossus grow higher each year with a sense of pride and awe, knowing that it would become their legacy. When the statue was completed around 280 BCE, it was not merely a monument, it was a statement. The Rhodians had endured war, but here stood proof of their resilience, their faith in Helios, and their place among the great cities of the world. Ships approaching the harbour would have seen the sun glinting off the Colossus's bronze surface from miles away, as if Helios himself was blessing their arrival. And yet, for all its grandeur, the Colossus's reign over the harbour was brief. In 226 BCE, just 54 years after it was completed, a massive earthquake struck Rhodes. The ground trembled violently, buildings crumbled, and the mighty statue fell. Ancient accounts describe the Colossus breaking at the knees, collapsing onto the harbour with such force that it must have seemed as if the sun god himself had been struck down. The Rhodians were heartbroken. They considered rebuilding the Colossus, but an oracle advised them not to. It was believed that the fall of the statue had angered Helios, and to rebuild it might invite even greater misfortune, and so the Colossus lay in ruins for centuries, its pieces scattered across the harbor. Yet, even in ruin, it inspired awe. Travelers who saw the fallen statue wrote about the immense size of its remains. According to some reports, even lying broken on the ground, the fingers of the Colossus were so large that a man could not wrap his arms around one of them. The hollow bronze plates, now exposed, revealed the intricate network of stone and iron that had once supported the figure. People would come just to gaze at the fragments, imagining what it must have been like when it still stood tall. For nearly 800 years the ruins remained where they had fallen. Then in 654 CE, when the Arabs invaded Rhodes, they sold what was left of the Colossus as scrap metal. Legend has it that the bronze was melted down and carried away on the backs of 900 camels, a final journey for what had once been one of the greatest wonders of the ancient world. Today, nothing remains of the Colossus but memory, and yet the idea of rebuilding it has never truly gone away. Over the years, there have been proposals to construct a modern version of the Colossus at the entrance of Rhodes Harbour, not as a replica, but as a symbol of hope, unity, and resilience, just as the original was for the people of Rhodes. Whether or not that ever happens, the legend of the Colossus continues to shine, like sunlight dancing on the sea. There's something deeply human about the story of the Colossus of Rhodes. It speaks to our desire to create, to leave behind something bigger than ourselves, something that will last. The Rhodians built the Colossus not just as a monument to their god, but as a statement to the world. We are here, and we are strong. And perhaps that is why its story endures. We don't just marvel at the statue's size or the technical genius required to build it. We marvel at the ambition behind it, at the way humans throughout history have looked at the world and thought, we can shape this, we can leave something behind that will outlive us. Even now, standing at the harbor of Rhodes, you can feel the ghost of the Colossus. The sea glitters in the sunlight, the waves roll softly against the rocks, and somewhere in the breeze, you can almost hear the creak of scaffolding, the clang of hammers on bronze, the murmur of voices speaking in ancient Greek. The Colossus may be gone, but in a way it still stands, just not in bronze or stone, but in memory and imagination. The watchful eyes of Easter Island. Far out in the lonely waters of the southeastern Pacific, there is a dot on the map that has fascinated explorers, historians, and dreamers for centuries. Rapa Nui, better known as Easter Island, is one of the most remote inhabited places on Earth. Over 2,000 miles separate it from the nearest continental coastline, and the nearest inhabited island is hundreds of miles away. To sail across the ocean and find Rapa Nui is to encounter not just land, but a mystery carved in stone. This mystery is written across the windswept hills and grassy plains of the island, in the form of the moai, massive stone statues, standing silent and watchful, their faces etched with the solemn dignity of a people long gone. The moai are extraordinary not just for their size, but for the presence they command. Each one stands like a sentinel, its long face gazing inward across the island. Their backs face the ocean, as though they are not watching for invaders from the sea, but rather keeping a vigilant eye over the villages, fields, and sacred places of the Rapa Nui people. Some moai are small, only a few feet tall, but many are colossal, 20, 30, even 40 feet high, with the largest unfinished statue, El Gigante, intended to stand nearly 70 feet tall. The largest statues weigh upwards of 80 tons, as heavy as a full train car. Yet these stones were carved and moved by a culture without metal tools, without wheels, and without draft animals. How they did it remains one of history's enduring puzzles. Imagine arriving on Easter Island for the first time. You sail across a seemingly endless expanse of ocean, guided only by the stars and the rise of the sun, as the Polynesians did centuries ago. The island is small, just 63 square miles, and yet as you approach, it rises sharply out of the waves, its cliffs dark and volcanic, its hills green with grass that sways in the wind. The air is filled with the cries of seabirds, and then, as you come closer, you see them. Giant stone faces, half buried in the slopes, some standing tall on platforms near the shore. They look both ancient and eternal, like they have been waiting for you all along. The Rapa Nui people who settled this island were master navigators. They likely came here between 800 and 1200 CE, sailing thousands of miles across open ocean from other Polynesian islands. They arrived on a land covered with giant palm trees and rich in birds and fish. Over time, they cultivated crops such as sweet potatoes, taro, and bananas, and they developed a complex social and spiritual culture. It was within this culture that the moai were born. The Rapa Nui believed that the spirits of their ancestors, known as mana, could protect the living and bring prosperity to the community. To honor and channel this spiritual power, they carved the moai, great stone guardians that would watch over their descendants. The process of carving a moai was long and laborious. Most statues were carved from volcanic tuff, a relatively soft rock found at the quarry of Rano Raraku. This quarry, which looks today like a giant open-air museum, is filled with statues in every stage of completion. Some are just rough outlines on the rock face, while others are nearly finished but remain half-buried, as if the carvers simply stopped one day and left their work to the wind and rain. Archaeologists believe the statues were carved lying flat, directly into the rock. Using simple stone tools, teams of carvers would spend months, even years, shaping the moai's head, shoulders and torso. When a statue was complete, it was carefully cut from the bedrock, ready for its journey across the island. And what a journey that must have been. Transporting a statue weighing 50 or 60 tons over several miles of uneven terrain is no small feat. For centuries, this question has baffled scholars. Some believe the Rapa Nui used wooden sledges and rollers, cutting down the island's forests to move the statues. Others suggest they used a method that required fewer resources, walking the statues upright with ropes. In this method, teams on either side would pull alternately, rocking the statue forward step by step. Experiments in recent decades have shown that a small group of people can indeed walk a replica moai in this way. It's an extraordinary thought that these great stone faces may have made their journey standing tall, swaying from side to side like living beings. When a moai reached its destination, it was placed on a stone platform known as an ahu. These ahu were sacred spaces, often built near the coastline. Once the statue was erected, the Rapa Nui would insert eyes made of white coral and black obsidian, awakening the moai and allowing it to watch over the land. Standing before one of these statues, with its gaze fixed somewhere beyond the horizon, you can almost feel its presence. It's not just a sculpture, it's a vessel of spirit, a connection between the world of the living and the realm of the ancestors. But the story of Rapa Nui is not only one of creation and reverence, it is also one of change, challenge and decline. Over the centuries, as more and more statues were carved and moved, the island's resources became strained. The forests that once covered the island were cut down for fuel, for canoes, and perhaps for moving the moai. With no trees to hold the soil, erosion set in, crops became harder to grow. Conflicts arose between clans and, according to some oral traditions, rival groups began to topple each other's statues. By the time the first Europeans arrived in 1722, the island's society had already undergone profound transformations. Yet the moai remain. Even in their fallen state, they retain a kind of quiet dignity. Those that still stand on their ahu are hauntingly beautiful, their silhouettes stark against the sky. At dawn, when the first light spills across the island, the statues seem to glow, their shadows long and solemn. At sunset, as the sky turns red and gold, they become dark sentinels, watching over the island as they have for centuries. The mystery of the moai is not just about how they were made or moved, it is about what they mean. These statues are more than works of art, they are expressions of a people's identity, their faith and their connection to the land. Each moai represents an ancestor, a chief or a spiritual figure whose memory was meant to endure for generations. In carving these figures, the Rapa Nui ensured that their ancestors would always be present, watching and guiding. Today, Easter Island is home to around 7,000 people, many of them descendants of the original Rapa Nui. The moai remain central to their cultural identity. Archaeologists, historians and local caretakers work together to preserve the statues, which are vulnerable to weathering, erosion and the pressures of tourism. To the Rapa Nui, the moai are not relics of a forgotten time, but living symbols of their heritage and resilience. When you stand among the statues, the world feels different. The wind carries the scent of the ocean, and the whisper of grass. The cries of seabirds echo across the cliffs. There is a profound silence, a stillness that feels ancient. You can almost hear the voices of the carvers, the chants of the workers who once walked these statues across the island, the prayers of those who believed in the manner of their ancestors. And there is still so much we don't know. Why did the Rapa Nui stop building the moai? Was it due to environmental collapse, social upheaval, or something else entirely? Some researchers suggest that a combination of factors, including overpopulation, deforestation, and the arrival of European diseases, led to the decline of the moai building culture. Others argue that the Rapa Nui were far more resilient than once believed, and that they adapted to changing conditions in remarkable ways. Whatever the truth, the Moai endure as a testament to human creativity, determination, and belief. They remind us that even in the most remote corners of the world, people have always sought to leave their mark, to create something lasting, something that connects the past to the future. The Moai, with their watchful eyes, are part of that universal story. If you visit Easter Island at night, when the stars blaze overhead and the Milky Way stretches across the sky, the experience is unforgettable. The Moai stand in silence, their outlines dark against the starlit horizon. It's easy to imagine the ancient navigators who first arrived here, using those same stars to find their way. The connection between the heavens, the land, and the people is palpable. The Rapa Nui also left behind petroglyphs, carvings etched into stone depicting birds, fish, and symbols of their spiritual life. These too tell stories of a culture deeply tied to nature and the sea. Together with the Moai, they form a landscape of memory, a living history carved into earth and stone. As you walk through Rano Raraku, the quarry where the statues were born, you feel the weight of centuries pressing close. Some Moai are buried up to their shoulders in earth, their faces tilted toward the sky, as if waiting for someone to finish their story. The unfinished El Gigante lies sprawled on the ground, a monument to ambition and perhaps to the limits of human effort. Why was it never completed? Was it too large to move, or was it abandoned when society changed? We can only guess, and yet, despite all these unanswered questions, there is a sense of peace on Easter Island. The Moai are not just symbols of a lost world, they are symbols of continuity. They have survived storms, earthquakes, and centuries of human change. They stand as a reminder of the enduring bond between people and the places they call home. When you finally leave the island, whether by ship or by plane, you carry their gaze with you. The Moai watch from the hills, their faces solemn and timeless. They have seen generations come and go. They have witnessed the rise and fall of their makers, the arrival of strangers from across the sea, and the slow unfolding of history. And still they remain, rooted to the land, as much a part of Rapa Nui as the wind, the waves, and the endless sky. Stonehenge, where time stands still. In the rolling plains of Wiltshire, England, there is a circle of stones that has stood for thousands of years, silent and steadfast against the winds of time. Stonehenge. Even its name carries a sense of mystery, as though it belongs to a language not entirely of this world. To walk toward it is to step into a place where history feels alive, where every stone hums with stories too old to remember, yet too powerful to forget. Stonehenge is not simply a collection of rocks set in the ground, it is a monument that predates written history, older than the pyramids of Egypt, older even than most of the ancient myths that humans hold dear. Some of its stones, the towering sarsens, weigh over 25 tons each. Others, the smaller bluestones, were carried from distant mountains in Wales, some 150 miles away. How did these ancient builders, without wheels, without iron tools, and without beasts of burden, manage to move and raise stones of such immense size? And why did they do it? These are the questions that have kept Stonehenge alive in our imagination for centuries. When you approach Stonehenge for the first time, the landscape seems ordinary at first: open fields, soft hills, a sky that stretches unbroken in every direction. And then you see it, rising from the earth, like something deliberately placed between the world of humans and the realm of the gods. The stones are weathered and rough, some standing tall, others fallen, but together they form a circle that feels both sacred and eternal. It is not just the shape of the monument that captivates you, but the weight of time itself. These stones have seen over 4,000 winters, 4,000 springs, summers, and autumns. They have stood while entire civilizations rose and fell, while languages were born and died, while the world outside changed beyond recognition. No one knows exactly who built Stonehenge. It was not the work of a single generation, but of many. Archaeologists believe construction began around 3000 BCE and continued in stages for over 1,000 years. Imagine that for a moment, 1,000 years. The people who placed the first wooden posts, who dug the circular earthworks, were long gone before the great stones were raised. Entire communities lived and died under its shadow, never knowing the finished form, never seeing the full meaning of what they were building. Perhaps that is why Stonehenge still feels so mysterious, because it was created not as a monument to a single moment, but as a bridge between ages. One of the most extraordinary aspects of Stonehenge is its alignment with the sun. On the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, the first light of dawn shines through the stones in perfect harmony, casting shadows and beams that seem designed to connect earth and sky. On the winter solstice, the shortest day, the sun sets directly between the uprights of the great trilithons, as though the monument is marking the death and rebirth of light. For ancient people who lived by the rhythm of the seasons, this was not just impressive engineering, it was magic. It was a way of touching the sky, of understanding the great cycles of time that govern life and death. And yet, Stonehenge is not alone. Scattered across Britain and Europe are other stone circles, burial mounds, and ancient monuments that seem connected in purpose. It is as if there was once a shared language of stone, a way of speaking with the land and the heavens. The builders of Stonehenge may have been part of a vast network of communities who passed down knowledge of astronomy, engineering, and spiritual ritual. We may never fully understand their beliefs, but we can sense their intention in the way the stones are placed, so carefully, so precisely, that even now, thousands of years later, they still hold their alignment. The stones themselves are a wonder. The sarsens, the larger stones, are believed to have been dragged from the Marlborough Downs, about 20 miles away. Think of that. Each one as heavy as a truck, moved by human hands alone. Some archaeologists believe they used wooden sledges and rollers, hauling the stones over land with ropes. Others suggest they may have transported them on sledges greased with animal fat, sliding them over logs or wet clay. The smaller blue stones came from the Preseli Hills in Wales, which is even more astonishing. To bring them over 150 miles would have required a combination of land hauling and river transport, a feat of planning and cooperation that boggles the mind even today. Once the stones were on site, the real challenge began, raising them. Imagine a group of people digging a deep pit, placing the base of a 20-ton stone into it, and then using ropes and sheer determination pulling it upright. The lintels, the horizontal stones that rest atop the uprights, were placed using an ingenious system of earthen ramps and levers. The precision of their joints, the mortise and tenon cuts, like those in wooden carpentry, shows a level of craftsmanship that is nothing short of brilliant. But Stonehenge is not only about engineering, it is about meaning. Why did they build it? Was it a temple, a burial ground, a calendar? Perhaps it was all of these. Excavations around the site have revealed cremated human remains, suggesting that Stonehenge was used for funerary purposes. The alignment with the solstices hints at an astronomical role, a way of tracking the passage of time and the turning of the seasons. Some scholars believe it was a place of healing, a sacred site where people came to seek spiritual renewal. Others see it as a symbol of unity, built by a society that wanted to create something lasting, something that spoke to both earth and sky. When you stand inside the circle, you can feel that intention. The stones are taller than they appear from a distance, their surfaces rough and pitted, their edges softened by centuries of wind and rain. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear the sounds of ancient rituals, the low beat of drums, the chanting of voices, the crackle of fire. You can imagine the solstice sun rising over the heel stone, flooding the circle with golden light, while a gathering of people watches in awe. Over the centuries, Stonehenge has inspired myths and legends. In medieval times, it was said to have been built by giants, or by the wizard Merlin, who supposedly brought the stones from Ireland with magic. Other tales speak of it as a doorway to another world, a place where time and space bend, and in a way those stories are not so far from the truth. For when you stand there, among the stones, time does seem to blur. You are connected to the people who built it, to the thousands who have visited it, and to the countless generations who have looked at it and wondered the same questions you do now. Even in modern times, Stonehenge continues to draw people from around the world. On the summer solstice, thousands gather at dawn to watch the sunrise, just as ancient people once did. They come not only for the spectacle, but for the sense of connection to the past, to the earth, to something greater than themselves. And when the first rays of sunlight pierce through the stones, there is a moment of stillness, a moment when time itself seems to pause. Stonehenge is a reminder of what humans can achieve, even with the simplest of tools, when driven by belief and purpose. It is also a reminder that we are part of something much larger, a cycle of seasons, of life and death, of light and shadow. The people who built Stonehenge may not have had the technology we do today, but they understood something fundamental about the world. They knew how to listen to the rhythms of nature, how to honor the turning of the earth and the path of the sun. To walk away from Stonehenge is to carry a piece of its mystery with you. Long after you leave the circle behind, you will remember the way the stones stood against the sky, the way the wind moved through the grass, the way the place seemed to hum with ancient energy. You will remember that there are places in this world where time stands still, where the past is not gone but present, etched into the stones beneath your feet. Stonehenge is one of those places. It is not just a monument of stones, but a monument of time, a bridge between what was and what is, between the living and the dead, between the earth and the sky. It has stood for over 4,000 years, and it will likely stand for thousands more, watching as the seasons turn, as the world changes, as people come and go, always wondering, always looking up at the stones, asking the same timeless questions. The buried secrets of Superhenge. Beneath the quiet fields of Wiltshire, just a few miles from the iconic circle of Stonehenge, there lies a secret that only modern technology has allowed us to glimpse. It does not rise above the ground like its more famous neighbour. It does not cast long shadows at sunset or appear in countless photographs. In fact, to the naked eye, the landscape where it sleeps looks unremarkable, a stretch of grassland, rippling slightly with the wind, the kind of English countryside you might drive past without ever suspecting that anything extraordinary lies beneath your feet. And yet, under this very soil, there is something colossal, something ancient, something that suggests a story even larger than Stonehenge. Archaeologists have named it Superhenge. The name might sound modern, but what it describes is far from it. Superhenge is believed to have been constructed over 4,000 years ago, during the same Neolithic age that gave us Stonehenge. It is part of what researchers now call the Stonehenge landscape, a network of earthworks, burial mounds, and ceremonial pathways that once stretched across these rolling plains, turning the area into a kind of sacred landscape. For centuries, Stonehenge was thought to stand alone, a singular marvel, but Superhenge reminds us that what we see today is only part of a much larger and much stranger ancient world. The first whispers of Superhenge emerged not from the ground, but from the sky. In 2015, archaeologists using ground-penetrating radar detected what appeared to be the shadows of giant stones buried beneath the earth near Durrington Walls, a short walk from Stonehenge itself. At first they weren't sure what they were looking at. The images showed a pattern of over 90 massive stones that if they were standing would have formed a vast circle or crescent nearly a mile in diameter. To put that in perspective, this structure would have been more than 10 times the size of Stonehenge. The sheer scale of it is staggering. Imagine standing in a field surrounded by towering stones, each one perhaps 15 feet high or more, arranged in an enormous arc that seems to stretch beyond the horizon. What kind of ceremonies would have taken place there? How many people would it have taken to build such a thing? What did it mean to them? These are the questions that haunt Superhenge, questions for which we still have no answers. The discovery of Superhenge also challenges our assumptions about Stonehenge itself. For years, Stonehenge has been studied as a unique monument, a singular feat of ancient engineering and spiritual vision. But the existence of another massive structure nearby suggests that this area was once far more significant than we imagined. It was not just a single stone circle, but part of a much larger ceremonial complex, one that may have been at the heart of a thriving culture. Walking across the fields where Superhenge lies buried, you might not see the stones, but you can feel their presence. There is something about the landscape here, something in the way the ground rises and falls, that hints at a deeper history. Archaeologists believe that the stones of Superhenge were deliberately buried, perhaps even toppled, thousands of years ago. Why would anyone do that? Was it part of some ritual closure, a way of ending the life of the monument, or was it the result of conquest, of one group dismantling the sacred site of another? We can only guess. Some researchers suggest that Superhenge may have begun not as a stone circle, but as a line of massive wooden posts, which were later replaced with stones. This transition from wood to stone is something we see across Neolithic Britain. Wood, with its warmth and life, was often associated with the world of the living. Stone, cold and enduring, was tied to the world of the dead. Perhaps Superhenge marked a threshold between these two realms, a place where ceremonies of life and death were carried out under the watchful sky. To fully appreciate Superhenge, we have to imagine the world as it was thousands of years ago. Picture the Wiltshire Plains not as quiet farmland, but as a living, breathing landscape of ritual. The air filled with the smell of smoke from sacred fires, processions of people moving slowly along ceremonial avenues, carrying offerings, drums beating in rhythm with footsteps. Priests, or whatever spiritual leaders they had, standing before the towering stones, speaking words we no longer understand, words that might have called on the sun, the moon, the ancestors, or forces we cannot name. Superhenge and Stonehenge may have been part of a larger cycle of monuments that traced the journey of life and death. Archaeologists have found evidence that the nearby River Avon served as a symbolic link between them. Stonehenge, with its eternal stones, was connected to the idea of death and the afterlife. Durrington Walls near Superhenge seems to have been a place of feasting and living celebration. The river may have been the path between the two, a journey of the soul from the world of the living to the world of the ancestors. One of the most intriguing aspects of Superhenge is that we still don't know if the stones remain beneath the ground. The radar images suggest that they might have been pulled down and buried, but some researchers think they could be huge, upright stones, simply hidden by centuries of earth and grass. The truth is, excavation has been limited. The site is so large and so delicate that archaeologists have been cautious about disturbing it. There's a sense that Superhenge holds secrets that will only be revealed with time and patience. But even without excavation, technology has allowed us to peek into the past in ways that previous generations could not. Using advanced scanning techniques, researchers have mapped out the shape of Superhenge with remarkable clarity. It is not a perfect circle, like Stonehenge, but rather a massive horseshoe shape, open toward the river. This suggests that it may have been built for ceremonies that involved movement, perhaps processions entering from one side and exiting the other, following a path that mirrored the sun's journey across the sky. When we think of ancient monuments, we often imagine them as isolated, standing alone in a forgotten landscape. But Superhenge reminds us that these places were once part of a vibrant, interconnected world. There were villages here, feasts, gatherings of people from across the region. Archaeological digs around Durrington Walls have uncovered the remains of houses, animal bones from great feasts, pottery shards and tools. It was a place of life as much as it was a place of ritual. What is perhaps most humbling about Superhenge is the sheer effort it would have taken to build. To erect a monument of this scale, hundreds, perhaps thousands of people would have needed to work together. They would have cut, shaped and transported stones weighing up to 15 tons each, using nothing but stone tools, wooden sledges, and ropes made from plant fibers. They would have dug enormous ditches and banks with antler picks and wooden shovels, and they did all of this, not because they had to, but because they believed it mattered. Because they wanted to leave something behind that would endure long after they were gone. And endure it has, though not in the way they might have imagined. The stones of Superhenge may lie hidden now, but they still shape the land. They still call to us, even after 4 millennia. They remind us that our modern world, with all its speed and noise, is built on layers of history we can barely comprehend. There is something deeply calming about thinking of Superhenge at night. Imagine the fields under a blanket of stars, the silhouettes of stones, or perhaps their shadows, standing silent in the dark. Imagine the wind moving through the grass, carrying whispers of voices long gone. It's not hard to believe that this was once a sacred place, a place where people felt connected to the cosmos. When archaeologists first announced the discovery of Superhenge, the world was captivated. Headlines called it the Stonehenge that dwarfs Stonehenge, the hidden giant, the lost circle. But beyond the excitement of discovery, there is a quieter truth. Superhenge shows us how much we still don't know. For every answer we find, a dozen new questions arise. Who built it? Why was it buried? What rituals took place there? What did those people believe about the world, about life and death, about the stars? Standing on the fields today, you might not see the stones, but if you pause and listen, you might feel something, a hum in the earth, a sense that the ground remembers. You might look at the horizon and wonder what it was like, thousands of years ago, when this place was alive with firelight and music, when the stones stood tall, and when the people who built them looked up at the same stars we see now, asking the same questions. Superhenge is not just an archaeological site, it is a story still unfolding. It reminds us that history is not fixed but alive, waiting to be rediscovered. It tells us that even the most ordinary-looking fields can hide extraordinary secrets. And it invites us to look deeper, not just into the earth, but into ourselves, into the part of us that still wanders, that still seeks meaning in the turning of the seasons and the movement of the sun. Japan's sunken city of Yonaguni, off the southwestern coast of Japan, where the East China Sea rolls into the Pacific, there is a place where the sunlight filters down through clear water to reveal something that does not quite belong to nature. Here, beneath the waves near Yonaguni Island, lies one of the most mysterious underwater structures ever discovered, an immense formation of stone terraces, steps, and pillars that appear so precisely shaped that it is difficult to believe they are natural. This place has become known as the Yonaguni Monument, and for decades, divers, archaeologists, and dreamers have debated whether it is the creation of nature, the remains of an ancient city, or something even more extraordinary. To reach Yonaguni, you travel to Japan's southernmost islands, part of the Ryukyu archipelago. This is a place of warm breezes, turquoise seas and coral reefs, paradise for divers. The waters here are famous for their clarity, and on a calm day you can see 30 meters down with ease. For centuries, the people of Yonaguni lived quiet lives of fishing and farming, unaware that something incredible lay hidden beneath the waves just off their shore. It wasn't until 1986 that the underwater formation was brought to the world's attention, when a local diver searching for hammerhead sharks noticed what looked like a massive set of carved steps descending into the deep. The diver, Kihachiro Aratake, returned to the site again and again, each time realizing just how strange it was. The stone didn't look random. It wasn't just a boulder or a reef. There were straight lines, right angles, and what looked like enormous platforms, terraces that could have been plazas or foundations of buildings. When he shared his discovery, the diving community exploded with excitement. Soon geologists and archaeologists were on their way to Yonaguni, curious to see if this could be proof of a lost civilization. What they found is something that continues to puzzle the scientific world. The Yonaguni monument is massive, about 50 meters long and 20 meters wide, rising from the seafloor like the ruins of a sunken temple. There are features that look like staircases, leading up to flat platforms. There are walls, sharp-edged corners, and even what some call a stage or altar. At its highest point, the structure sits just 5 meters below the surface, meaning that on a clear day sunlight dances across its surface in golden ripples. Standing, well swimming, above it, you can't help but feel like you're looking at something man-made. The lines are too clean, the angles too precise. But then nature can surprise us. Some geologists argue that the Yonaguni formation is entirely natural, the result of tectonic activity and natural fracturing of sandstone layers. The ocean currents, over thousands of years, have sculpted the rock into these dramatic shapes, and yet there are details that make skeptics pause. For example, there is what appears to be a perfect set of steps, each one about a meter high, rising in a neat sequence, as if they were carved for someone to climb. There are flat platforms that resemble courtyards. There is even a feature that resembles a road, running alongside the monument, like an ancient street. Some divers claim to have seen markings, carvings or inscriptions on certain parts of the stone, though these could just be natural patterns. If the Yonaguni monument is truly man-made, that raises even bigger questions. The area where it sits would have been above water during the last ice age, over 10,000 years ago, when sea levels were much lower. That would mean that this structure, if it is a city or a temple, was built long before any known advanced civilization in Japan. It would predate the pyramids of Egypt and the great cities of Mesopotamia. Could there have been a forgotten culture here, building monumental stone architecture, while the rest of the world was still living in small hunter-gatherer groups? Some researchers, like marine geologist Masaki Kimura, believe that is exactly the case. Kimura has studied Yonaguni for years, diving the site countless times, mapping its features, and even suggesting that the monument is part of a larger complex that includes roads, smaller buildings, and even what might have been a pyramid. He believes that the site was once part of a thriving city that sank when the Ice Age ended, and rising sea levels swallowed the coastlines. Of course, not everyone agrees. Many archaeologists remain skeptical, pointing out that no artifacts, no pottery, tools or carvings have been found at Yonaguni. Without evidence of human activity, it's hard to call it a city. But then again, the ocean is not kind to archaeology. Anything left on the surface for thousands of years would likely have been swept away or buried under sediment. Whether natural or human-made, there is no denying the eerie beauty of the Yonaguni monument. Diving there is like entering another world. The water is clear, the sunlight ripples like gold across the stone, and as you swim along the terraces and edges, you feel as though you are gliding over the rooftops of an ancient city. There is silence, except for the sound of your own bubbles rising to the surface. Imagine for a moment that this really was a city. What would it have looked like? Perhaps there were wooden structures built atop the stone platforms, long since rotted away. Perhaps people gathered on the wide flat terraces, holding ceremonies under the sun. Maybe the steps were part of a grand staircase, leading up to a temple or palace. And then, one day the sea rose, slowly at first, then faster. The people would have watched as the waters crept closer, swallowing their fields and homes. Eventually the waves would have claimed everything, leaving only the stones behind. There is something deeply humbling about places like Yonaguni. They remind us how temporary our own civilizations are, how quickly nature can reclaim what we build. Whether it is a city that sank 10,000 years ago, or simply a geological formation, Yonaguni has a way of making you feel small. It makes you wonder what else is out there, hidden under the oceans. After all, Most of Earth's ancient coastlines are now underwater, drowned when the Ice Age glaciers melted. How many other lost cities are waiting to be found? Exploring Yonaguni is not easy. The currents here can be strong, and the dive site is best left to experienced divers. But those who have gone say it is unforgettable. The play of light and shadow on the stone, the sheer scale of the monument, the sense of mystery, all of it combines to create an experience that feels almost otherworldly. Some divers describe it as like visiting an alien landscape. Others say it feels like swimming through history itself. There are even those who believe that Yonaguni might not be entirely natural or entirely human-made, but something in between. Perhaps the natural rock formations were modified by ancient people, carved into terraces and steps to suit their purposes. This idea is not far-fetched. After all, many ancient cultures shaped natural features into sacred or functional spaces. What's clear is that the Yonaguni monument continues to inspire fascination. It has been featured in documentaries, explored by underwater archaeologists, and even linked by some to the legendary lost continent of Moor or Lemuria, mythical lands said to have sunk beneath the Pacific Ocean. While mainstream science does not accept these myths as fact, the allure of Yonaguni has kept such theories alive. At the end of the day, Yonaguni is a place of questions. It asks us to look closer, to wonder about the past, and to imagine possibilities beyond what we know. Was there a civilization here, building stone monuments before history began? Or are we simply seeing the artistry of nature, shaped by water and time into something that resembles a human creation? If you ever find yourself in the Ryukyu Islands, standing on the cliffs of Yonaguni as the sun sets over the ocean, it's worth pausing to think about what lies just beneath those waves. Out there, in the quiet blue depths, the stones of Yonaguni wait. Whether they are the ruins of a forgotten city, or the masterpiece of nature itself, they remind us of how much remains hidden, how much of our planet's story is still untold. The floating monolith of Ishi no Horden, in the heart of Japan's Higo Prefecture, tucked within the quiet town of Takasago, there is a place where stone seems to defy both weight and reason. Here stands, or rather hovers, a massive block of granite known as Ishi no Horden, a monolith so large and so strangely positioned that for centuries it has inspired awe, legends, and endless questions. To stand before this stone is to feel the hum of something ancient, something that almost feels alive, as though it is holding its breath, floating forever just above the ground. The name Ishi no Horden translates roughly to stone treasure hall, but the first impression most visitors have is not of a treasure, but of a riddle. The monolith is enormous, about 5.7 meters tall, 6.5 meters long, and weighing roughly 500 tons. And yet, it does not sit firmly on the ground, like a regular stone. Instead, it appears to float just above the earth, with a narrow gap running beneath its base. The first time you see it, your eyes play tricks on you. You might even step closer to crouch down, looking under the massive block, half expecting to see ropes or supports holding it in place. But there is nothing, just a small pool of water and open space. There are places on Earth where nature itself seems to leave behind works of art, boulders shaped by wind and rain, stones balanced in impossible ways. But Ishi no Horden does not feel like one of these random creations. It feels intentional. Its edges are sharp, its sides smooth, and its presence commanding. Standing in front of it, you can't help but wonder, who carved this? Why? And perhaps most of all, how? The local legends surrounding Ishi no Horden stretch back centuries. One of the most enduring stories claims that the monolith was created by the gods themselves. According to Shinto mythology, it is said that the deities Hikunanushi and Sukuna Hikona, two divine figures known for shaping the lands of Japan, descended to this place and left the stone as a symbol of their power. Another tale says that the stone is not from this world at all, but a relic from the heavens, a gift from celestial beings. For the people who lived here long ago, there was simply no other explanation. How else could such an immense stone have been shaped and positioned with such precision? One can imagine the villagers of ancient times, walking through the dense woods and stumbling upon this giant block of rock that looked as though it had been left hanging in mid-air. The sight must have stirred both fear and reverence. It is no surprise that the area surrounding Ishi no Horden eventually became a sacred site. Even today there is a small shrine nearby, where visitors bow and leave offerings, perhaps asking for blessings from the same spirits once believed to have created this floating stone. When you visit Ishi no Horden, the first thing you feel is quiet, not just the ordinary quiet of a rural town, but a deeper stillness, as though the stone itself is holding the world in suspension. You walk up a small path, the trees parting slowly to reveal the massive block of granite. It emerges from the earth like the prow of a great ship, sharp and angular, its sides rising with an unnatural smoothness. The pool beneath it reflects its underside, creating the illusion that it's suspended in the air like a hovering vessel. For many, it feels less like walking into a historical site, and more like stepping into a dream. The truth is, no one knows exactly when or why Ishi-no-Horden was created. There are no written records that describe its origin. Some researchers suggest that it was an unfinished quarry project, abandoned long ago when the workers realized that shaping or moving such a massive stone was simply impossible with the tools of the time. Others believe that it might have been intended as the foundation of a grand structure, a shrine, a temple, or a tomb, though no evidence of such a building has ever been found. And then there are those who see it as something more symbolic, perhaps a monument to the gods or the spirits of the land. The mystery deepens when you consider the sheer scale of the work that would have been required. Even today, with cranes and heavy machinery, cutting and positioning a 500-ton block of granite would be a monumental challenge. In ancient Japan, it would have been unthinkable. The people of the time had only chisels, hammers, and primitive techniques. Yet somehow this massive stone was shaped, smoothed, and left perched on a narrow base that makes it look as though it is floating. There is also the question of why the stone was left unfinished, or perhaps perfectly finished, depending on how you see it. The cut marks on its sides suggest deliberate carving, yet no one knows the purpose. Was it part of something larger that was never completed? Or is the monolith itself the final artwork, a deliberate act of shaping nature into something that challenges our understanding of gravity and form? As you stand there, it's easy to imagine the workers of the past, their hands calloused from endless hours of chiseling, sweat running down their faces as they chipped away at the granite under the blazing sun. You can almost hear the rhythmic sound of hammers striking stone, echoing through the hills. But why did they stop? Did they run out of resources? Did something happen, an event, a disaster, that forced them to abandon the project? Or was this always meant to be left exactly as it is, a solitary monolith meant to confuse and inspire every generation that came after? Local folklore has another explanation. The stone was never completed because it wasn't meant to be touched by humans. It is said that anyone who attempts to cut or move the monolith will anger the gods, bringing misfortune upon themselves. Whether or not people truly believed this, the legend alone would have been enough to keep most away. The setting of Ishi-no-Horden adds to its mystique. Surrounded by hills and forests, the monolith feels as though it has been carefully hidden from the modern world. Birds call softly in the trees, the wind rustles through the leaves, and the stone just sits there, silent, unmoving, but strangely alive. If you place your hand on its cool surface, you can feel the faint texture of ancient chisel marks, grooves worn into the stone by human hands long vanished. It's a strange feeling, like touching a message from another time. The pool beneath the stone is another curious feature. Fed by natural springs, the water forms a mirror-like surface on calm days. When the light hits just right, the reflection of the stone in the water makes it appear as though the monolith is levitating. It's not hard to see why people once believed it was floating by divine power. Even today, many visitors find themselves whispering when they approach, as though speaking too loudly might disturb whatever sacred presence lingers here. Researchers have attempted to study Ishi-no-Horden using modern methods, but the site still holds more questions than answers. There are no inscriptions, no carvings that might give clues to its builders. Unlike other megalithic structures, like Stonehenge or the Moai of Easter Island, there is no surrounding complex of stones or monuments. Ishi-no-Horden stands alone, a solitary riddle carved from the earth. Some theories suggest that the stone might have been a test site, where ancient stonemasons experimented with cutting techniques before tackling other large projects. Others think it could have been intended as a kind of spiritual anchor, a sacred stone meant to represent the connection between heaven and earth. In Shinto belief, large stones are often considered objects of worship, embodying divine spirits known as kami. Perhaps Ishi-no-Horden was meant to be exactly what it is, a sacred presence, a silent guardian of the land. Standing there, it's easy to get lost in thought. You start to imagine the lives of the people who once lived here, their daily routines, their festivals, and their prayers. You wonder if they stood where you are now, looking up at the stone with the same mix of confusion and wonder. Did they see it as a gift from the gods? Did they gather here during harvests or ceremonies, lighting fires and offering thanks to the unseen spirits? Even the air feels different near Ishi-no-Horden. There is a stillness, a sense of time standing still. You can hear the drip of water from the pool, the distant chirp of cicadas, and the faint rustle of wind through the pines. It's the kind of place where you could sit for hours, just watching the shadows move across the stone, feeling the weight of its history, or perhaps its mystery, settle over you like a soft blanket. It is no wonder that Ishi-no-Hoba has become a place of quiet pilgrimage. Tourists visit, but they do so with a kind of hushed respect, as though instinctively understanding that this is not a place for noise or haste. Locals still see it as sacred, a spot where the barrier between the human and the divine feels thinner. Perhaps the most fascinating thing about Ishi-no-Hoba is not what we know but what we don't. In a world where satellites map every inch of the earth, where we can scan ancient ruins with lasers and 3D imaging, here is a single stone that refuses to give up its secrets. It sits there heavy and silent, asking only that we look, wonder, and imagine. The silent keyhole tombs of Japan. In the gentle lowlands of Japan, where modern cities stretch and hum with life, there is a kind of silence that belongs to another world. If you leave behind the noise of highways, step away from the glass towers, and wander into the heart of old landscapes, you might come upon something unexpected: vast, grass-covered mounds, shaped like ancient keys. These are the kofun, or keyhole tombs of Japan, monumental burial mounds that stand as some of the oldest and most mysterious structures in the country. To see one from the ground is to see a mound, often fringed with trees, looking like a natural rise in the earth. But when viewed from above, whether from a hill, a drone, or an airplane, the true shape reveals itself. The tombs are designed in the shape of a keyhole, with a circular mound connected to a long rectangular approach. Some are small, but others stretch for hundreds of meters, immense earthworks that dominate the land. These tombs are ancient, older than most of the shrines and temples for which Japan is famous, and yet they remain shrouded in secrecy and silence. The largest of these is the Daisen Kofun, located in Sakai City, near Osaka. It is believed to have been built in the 5th century, and is attributed to Emperor Nintoku, though no one knows for certain if he truly lies within. The scale of the Daisen Kofun is astonishing. It measures around 486 meters in length, 307 meters across at its widest point, and rises to a height of 35 meters. To put that into perspective, this single burial mound is larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza in terms of the area it covers. If you could walk around its entire perimeter, it would take you nearly 2.5 kilometers to complete the circuit. But here's the strange thing: you can't. The kofun are heavily restricted, protected not only as cultural heritage sites, but also by the Japanese Imperial Household Agency. The agency has long maintained that the tombs are sacred resting places of imperial ancestors and must remain undisturbed. For decades, archaeologists have been barred from conducting large-scale excavations. Even the Daisen Kofun, one of the largest monuments in the world, is off-limits to the public. You can only look at it from the outside, or better yet from above, where its perfect keyhole shape comes into view. There is something eerily compelling about this secrecy. What lies beneath these mounds? What treasures, what clues to early Japanese history might be hidden inside? The silence surrounding the kofun has given rise to speculation. Some suggest that the imperial line is far older than we think, stretching back not just centuries but thousands of years. Others hint that these tombs might contain evidence of cultural exchanges with faraway lands, China, Korea, or even more distant regions. But beyond the theories, the kofun hold a quiet power simply because of their sheer presence. Imagine standing near the Daisen Kofun. You would see nothing but an enormous mound of earth, its sides covered with trees and grass. A moat filled with water encircles it, reflecting the sky like a quiet mirror. Birds nest in the trees, wind drifts across the surface of the water, rippling gently. It feels less like a burial site, and more like a sleeping giant, resting undisturbed for over 1,500 years. And then, when you think about the people who built this monument, the scale of their achievement becomes even more impressive. This was the 5th century. Japan was not yet the land of samurai and castles. It was a country of small kingdoms, tribal leaders, and emerging culture. And yet, here was a structure so large that it would have required tens of thousands of laborers, working in organized groups, moving countless tons of earth and stone by hand. The construction of a single kofun might have taken years, possibly decades of steady labor. What compelled them to build something so monumental? The answer, as far as we can tell, is the same reason that people built pyramids and megaliths around the world: power, legacy, and belief. The kofun are believed to be burial sites for emperors, kings, and powerful rulers of early Japan. These were not ordinary graves. They were statements, declarations carved into the earth itself. To build a mound of this size was to say, here lies a person so important that their spirit must be honored forever, their resting place elevated above all others. But the design of the Kofun is unique. Nowhere else in the world do we see burial mounds shaped like keyholes. Some scholars believe the shape may have had symbolic meaning, perhaps representing a gateway between the realms of the living and the dead. The circular portion could signify heaven, the rectangular approach representing earth, with the narrow passage connecting the two. Others suggest that the design might have practical roots, creating a ceremonial approach for processions during funerals. But the truth is, we do not know. The meaning of the keyhole shape is another one of the many mysteries locked away beneath the silence of these ancient tombs. Walking near one of these tombs, you might see rows of Haniwa terracotta clay figures placed in the surrounding earth. These figures, often shaped like warriors, animals, houses, or simple cylinders, were believed to protect the deceased and mark the boundary between the sacred and the mundane. Many of these Haniwa have been found in smaller kofun that archaeologists have been allowed to study, and they provide a haunting glimpse into the world of the people who built these tombs. Some Haniwa are smiling, others stern, and some simply abstract shapes standing like sentinels, silent guardians watching over their sleeping ruler. The Kofun period, which stretches roughly from the 3rd to the 7th century CE, was a time of dramatic change in Japan. Small tribal communities were giving way to larger states, influenced by cultures from China and Korea. The building of the Kofun reflects this shift, showing the emergence of a centralized power structure that could command the labor and resources needed to construct these monumental tombs. And yet, despite their importance, much of this history remains hazy. Without excavation, we are left with only the outer shells of these tombs and the stories that echo around them. Among the many kofun scattered across Japan, more than 160,000 by some counts, some are small enough to explore closely, while others, like the Daisen kofun, feel like entire landscapes in themselves. You can find kofun in unexpected places, quiet hillsides, patches of forest, or even tucked within modern neighborhoods. In some towns, the tombs sit beside schools and houses, blending seamlessly into everyday life, their ancient presence a quiet reminder of Japan's deep past. One particularly fascinating kofun is the Imashirazuka kofun, located near Osaka. Unlike many other keyhole tombs, parts of this site have been opened to the public, allowing visitors to walk along its grassy slopes and imagine the ceremonies that once took place there. Another is the Takatsuku kofun, known for its colorful murals painted on the interior walls, showing warriors, mythical creatures, and geometric patterns. These rare glimpses inside remind us that the kofun were not just burial mounds, they were entire worlds, filled with symbolism and meaning, built to guide the spirits of the dead to the afterlife. But the greatest mystery remains the imperial kofun, especially the Daisen kofun. In recent years, there have been quiet calls from archaeologists and historians asking for limited studies of these tombs, using non-invasive methods like ground-penetrating radar. The Imperial Household Agency has allowed some surveys, but full-scale excavation is still forbidden. The official reasoning is that these are sacred spaces, and disturbing them would be disrespectful to the ancestors. But for many, the question lingers: what secrets might we discover if we could look inside? Would we find evidence of the early emperors, or might we uncover something that rewrites the history of Japan itself? Legends whisper of treasures buried deep within the tombs, golden artifacts, weapons of great craftsmanship, even sacred texts. Some theories go further, suggesting that the tombs might hold evidence of ancient connections with faraway lands, perhaps even proving that the earliest Japanese rulers were not isolated, but part of a wider, interconnected world. Whether any of this is true, we may never know. For now, the keyhole tombs remain sealed, their stories locked away. There is something strangely fitting about this. The kofun are not loud monuments like the pyramids or the statues of Easter Island. They do not shout their history, they simply sit, silent and patient, as the centuries pass. Grass grows on their slopes, trees take root, birds build nests in their branches, rain falls, soaking into the earth. The world changes around them, but the tombs remain, watching. Imagine visiting one on a misty morning. The air is cool and damp, and the ground smells of wet grass and earth. The mound rises before you like a hill, its curves softened by the haze. A moat surrounds it, still and reflective, as though it holds not just water but memories. You stand there listening to the quiet, and you feel a presence, not threatening, but steady and eternal. It is as though the spirit of the past is speaking, not with words, but with silence. The pyramid, hidden inside a mountain. There are places in the world where the line between what is natural and what is built blurs into a single, unsettling mystery. In the heart of Japan's green and misty landscapes, there is one such place, a mountain that might not be a mountain at all. It rises quietly, wrapped in cedar and moss, its slopes gentle yet strangely geometric. It is known as Mount Miwa, a sacred peak in Nara Prefecture, long worshipped as a living deity by generations of people who never dared to cut into its heart. But beneath its veil of trees and soil, there are whispers of something ancient and deliberate, a hidden pyramid, some say, older than memory itself. Mount Miwa is unlike any other mountain in Japan. While most peaks are celebrated for their height or ruggedness, this one is venerated for its shape, its silence, and the sense of presence that lingers around it. The mountain itself is considered a kami, a divine being in Shinto belief, and for this reason no shrine building stands at its summit. Instead, the mountain itself is the shrine. Worshippers bow toward its slopes, not toward an idol or statue, but to the very shape of the earth. This alone sets Mount Miwa apart. For centuries, pilgrims have felt its quiet pull, sensing that something within or beneath it holds a story far older than the shrines and temples that dot the landscape today. At the base of the mountain stands Miwa Shrine, believed to be one of the oldest Shinto shrines in all of Japan. It is simple, almost austere, lacking the ornate halls or elaborate carvings that later shrines developed. Instead, the shrine's open form directs your gaze to the mountain itself. This is no ordinary hill. The mountain is the god, and the shrine is merely a doorway to its spirit. Visitors who walk through the wooden torii gates find themselves in the presence of something both vast and quiet, a sense that they are standing before an ancient guardian that has watched over the land since time beyond memory. Legends about Mount Miwa stretch back to Japan's earliest recorded texts, like the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki. These chronicles tell of a divine serpent that descended onto the mountain, glowing with the light of the heavens. Another tale speaks of an emperor who claimed to see the mountain glimmer beneath the moonlight, its slopes shining as if they were once polished stone. For those who believe in the pyramid theory, such tales are not mere poetic flourishes but echoes of something real, perhaps memories of a time when the mountain was not covered in forest, but stood as a deliberate monument. Some researchers have long speculated that Mount Miwa's symmetry is too perfect to be natural. Its triangular lines, visible from certain vantage points, seem to fall with a geometric precision that feels closer to architecture than geology. Most geologists dismiss this idea, arguing that volcanic and tectonic forces can create coincidentally pyramid-like forms. But the believers see something more. They point to small anomalies found during non-invasive surveys, patterns of stone beneath the soil, as if the mountain hides layers of deliberately arranged rock. These patterns, detected by ground-penetrating radar, remain unexplored due to the mountain's sacred status. No one is allowed to dig here. No one is allowed to disturb what lies beneath. And perhaps that is part of what makes the mystery of Mount Miwa so compelling. We may never know. The secrecy and reverence surrounding the mountain have preserved its legends while shielding whatever truth may lie beneath its slopes. Some even say that deep inside, there could be chambers, a network of hidden spaces, possibly tombs of ancient priest-kings or rulers from a time before Japan's recorded history began. The idea is not entirely far-fetched. The keyhole-shaped burial mounds, or kofun, scattered across Japan show that ancient builders were capable of creating massive earthworks on a monumental scale. Could Mount Miwa be the ultimate expression of that tradition? A pyramid so large it became mistaken for a natural peak. Climbing Mount Miwa is not like climbing any other mountain in Japan. Even today, access is restricted. Visitors must obtain permission from the shrine to step onto its paths, and those who do often undergo purification rituals before beginning their ascent. The mountain is seen as alive, watching and easily disturbed. Local lore speaks of hidden entrances, caverns sealed long ago, perhaps leading deep into the mountain's interior. Old tales warn of spirits guarding these places, ensuring that no one trespasses without the mountain's consent. This aura of mystery has made Mount Miwa not just a religious site, but a puzzle for historians, archaeologists and storytellers alike. Who first chose this mountain as a place of worship? Why did they treat it not merely as a natural wonder, but as a sacred being? And could those early people have known something that we have forgotten, that beneath its mossy slopes lies not just a hill but a monument, a silent echo of a civilization lost to time? Some alternative historians even suggest that Mount Miwa could be a relic of a civilization that predates known Japanese culture, perhaps stretching back to the end of the last ice age. They point to other mysterious structures in Japan, like the Yonaguni Monument, a massive underwater formation off Okinawa that resembles a sunken city, with terraces, steps and flat surfaces too precise to be random. If such a civilization once thrived in Japan, could Mount Miwa have been one of its greatest achievements? An artificial mountain built as a sacred observatory or tomb. It's easy to dismiss these ideas as speculation, and yet, when you stand at the base of Mount Miwa, when the mist clings to the trees and the wind stirs through the forest, the mountain does not feel like just another peak. It feels intentional. It feels alive. There is a weight to its silence, as though it has been holding its secrets for thousands of years, watching empires rise and fall, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. The rituals at Imiwa Shrine still honor that silence. Priests pour offerings of sake and rice, just as they have for centuries, bowing toward the mountain. Ceremonial dances known as Yamato Kagura are performed during special festivals, their slow, deliberate movements said to mirror the descent of the gods onto the mountain in ages past. These rituals are not merely about worship, but about connection, a way for people to align themselves with something greater, older, and more enduring than human history. Visitors often speak of the atmosphere around Mount Miwa as being different from other sacred sites. It is not just a place to see, but a place to feel. There are no towering pagodas or lavish carvings here. The mountain itself is the temple, its forests the walls, its streams the sacred pathways. At night, when the moonlight falls across its slopes, the mountain seems to breathe, its shape outlined in silver, as though whispering to those who are still enough to listen. If Mount Miwa is truly a pyramid, then it is a pyramid unlike any other in the world, hidden not by the sands of time but by the embrace of nature. Its builders, if they existed, have vanished, leaving no written records, no hieroglyphs or carvings, only a shape too precise to ignore. But perhaps that is the point. Perhaps the mountain was never meant to be uncovered. Perhaps its purpose was always to merge with the earth, to become indistinguishable from the world it was built upon, a bridge between the human and the divine. And maybe, just maybe, that is why it has survived. Mount Miwa remains a riddle, not because we lack the tools to investigate it, but because we choose not to disturb it. In a world where every mystery is dissected, photographed, and explained, there is something strangely comforting about a place that refuses to reveal itself. The mountain doesn't need us to understand it, it simply is, silent, symmetrical, and eternal. As you imagine standing there at its base, with the cool air carrying the faint scent of cedar, you might feel that pull too. You might find yourself looking up at its slopes, and wondering if you were staring not just at a mountain but at a monument, one built not for kings, but for the gods themselves. The world is filled with ancient structures that refuse to give up their secrets, reminders that history is far stranger and more incredible than we imagine. Which of these mysteries fascinated you the most? Thank you for watching Unearthed Secrets. If you enjoyed this journey through the past, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new story. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I love seeing our community from all around the world. Until next time, keep wondering what else is still hidden beneath the stones of history.